morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are, whatever time it is. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Light After Trauma podcast. I am your host, Alyssa Scolari, and today we are here to talk about another juicy topic. I love this topic. Again, I know I say that all the time, but this topic I am very passionate about. We are here to talk about BURNOUT. So no, I can't sing, but yes, I'm going to anyway on this podcast. And for those of you who struggle with spelling, that spells burnout. I'm really, really excited. So our guest today, who really has made his entire career and his biggest passion about burnout prevention, his name is Michael Levitt. Michael is the founder and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, a San Diego and Toronto-based burnout media firm. He is an in-person and certified virtual speaker, a certified NLP and CBT therapist, and is one of the world's leading authorities in burnout recovery and prevention. He is a Fortune 500 consultant and #1 best-selling author and host of the Breakfast Leadership Show, a top 200 podcast on iTunes. That's so exciting. He is a former healthcare executive, CIO, and CFO overseeing $2 billion budgets. So he has truly seen and done it all. So hello, Michael. Welcome to the Light After Trauma podcast. How's it going?
I am awesome. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
Me too. Okay, so I have to ask you, from reading your bio, so you're on the West Coast?
I split my time between San Diego and Toronto, and actually at the time of this recording, I'm in Toronto. With the U.S.-Canadian border closure, they've closed it to non-essential travel, and apparently I'm not essential, so I get to stay here, which is fine. You know, I'm a dual citizen, so I get to vote and screw up two countries, and you know, I'm comfortable either place. So, plus the weather now in Toronto is nice, so it's not bad. You should have talked with me in the winter. I'm like, why am I here? But
I'm sure
things are opening up. I anticipate, you know, by the fall of this year that it'll be easier to travel and all of that, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So Toronto to San Diego.
Whew. Yeah, it's a 5-hour flight, one way anyway. If you've got stops, then of course it gets much longer. But yeah, it's about a 5-hour flight, and obviously a little bit different temperature during the year. And I mean, right now we're about the same because I have the weather on my phone for, you know, both locations, and I always look at it like, oh wow, we're actually warmer than San Diego today. Interesting, but that doesn't happen a lot. But, you know, in the summertime it does. But not so much when that crinkly white stuff's falling from the sky. It's like, you don't tend to see that too. You don't tend to see that too much in San Diego. On the mountains, yes, but, you know, not by gas lamp or anything like that. So
no, not when you're hanging out at the San Diego Zoo.
Exactly. Yeah. The polar bears might be happy. It's like, finally, they got the weather right. But
right. At last.
Exactly.
Well, that's actually really cool. Obviously, I'm sure it comes with its frustrations, undoubtedly, but I don't know. That's kind of neat to be essentially have lives in two different countries. So we are here today to talk about burnout, which, as I stated earlier, is one of my favorite topics. Definitely getting more attention, as we were talking about, but there's not a lot of action, right? First, it's like acknowledging that this is a problem. And then it's like, okay, maybe we should start thinking about taking action. So I'm going to turn it over to you, the burnout expert. What is burnout? What does that mean?
Burnout is when you have prolonged stress, basically, to really narrow it down. And it's basically when you are completely fatigued, exhausted, you're mentally and physically drained, you have no motivation to do anything, and it's been over an extended period of time. Now, for each person, that could be a different period of time. You know, some people can burn out pretty quickly, and others, it can take several years for it to build up, depending on what's going on. But that's the thing I see with everybody that is actually at that burned out state is they're just done. They don't have any motivation. They're fatigued. They're living life in a fog. They really can't see things clearly. And quite frankly, they're almost numb to life, which is no way to exist.
Absolutely. I relate to that so well. I think that's a really, really good description because it's just like, it's that sense of almost like you're just going through the motions, I think, and nothing really means much to you, good or bad. It's just kind of like, eh.
I
Or on the
agree.
other sense, I feel like sometimes it can also be like you're the Energizer bunny, where it's like, I can't stop. I can't stop. I can't take a day off. I have to do this. People need me, right? People need me. I can't take a day off. I can't afford to. Like that type of mentality as well. I think it could maybe go either way.
It does. And a lot of people that I see that are burned out are what we like to call people pleasers. And they don't want to let anybody down. So they just continue working. Maybe their type A personality is very driven, very successful, and have always put in those 12, 14, 16-hour days kind of thing. And they wear it like it's a badge of honor. And it's like, no, actually, you'll end up having a different type of badge. And it'll be, whatever they put around your wrist when you're in the hospital, or a toe tag if you don't take care of yourself. And, I definitely flirted with that with my burnout journey.
Yeah, it's funny. As you're speaking, I'm like, oh, I feel personally attacked right here because that honestly, it truly was me. It was, chronic people pleasing, just working 12, 14-hour days. And, I think for me, I watched my mom get very, very sick and she almost died. We were told she was going to die. And I think it was a result of her chronic people pleasing and her burnout that is the reason why she almost died. And to this day continues to have health issues. So I think that was like a really big turning point for me. But I know you have an entire journey of your own with burnout. So would you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to. Back in 2007, I was hired as a healthcare executive for a startup healthcare organization just outside of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Again, I'm a dual citizen, born in the US, immigrated to Canada in 2004, my former wife, and became a citizen in 2011, hence the vote and screw up two countries joke that I made earlier. But in this role, and anybody that's ever worked in a startup, there's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of things to set up. I had to recruit physicians, hire staff, educate the community on why our clinic was better than the other clinics that had been in town for several years. And I had a very proactive board of directors. And even though I was an employee, as a people pleaser, or I identify myself now as a reformed people pleaser,
Yeah,
but as a
love that.
former people pleaser, I took it on my own and said, well, I'm going to act as if this is my company, which it isn't, but I acted as if it was, and was driven and was basically working 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week for a solid 2 years. During that time, when you're working that many hours and you're in an office type of role, you're not getting any level of exercise to speak of. And I certainly wasn't. Of course, when you're an executive, and we all know this, who gets the real close parking spot to the door? The executive. So I wasn't even getting 10,000 steps just because my parking spot was so good. I'd be lucky if I probably got 2,000 steps a day because our clinic size was rather small at that point. So it wasn't doing that. My nutrition plan, quite frankly, was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, ordering in a microphone, driving around the corner, paying for it, and getting a brown bag handed to me. And I just, and of course, working those long hours, you tend to eat differently. So you're eating later than you normally do. So that, of course, your body doesn't have an opportunity to break that down before you crash into bed, which then your body's got to break that down while you're sleeping. And sleep is so critical in prevention of burnout, and people that don't get good sleep, it's really problematic. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But this went on for 2 years. And then finally in May of 2009, I had what I refer to as my year of worst case scenarios. So I was mowing my front lawn on a Monday night. Actually, it was the anniversary is this week, ironically, but I was mowing my front lawn. And we had a small lawn, and gas prices were expensive back then, as they are now at the time of this recording. So
Right.
I had an electric mower, and this thing was really bulky to turn. It wasn't light at all. It was really hard to turn. So I mow the first row, and then I turn the lawnmower to mow the next row. I felt this incredible pain in the center of my chest. It really felt like I pulled a muscle, and it hurt so bad that I couldn't continue mowing the lawn. Now, I went inside, I took some pain medication. The pain went away unless I lifted anything with my right arm. Now, I'm left handed, so I don't tend to lift a lot with my right arm, but occasionally I do. And anytime I lifted anything, that pain would be there. It was dull. It didn't hurt badly, but it did, have some discomfort. So that went on for a few days. And then Thursday night of that week, went out to a local restaurant that had an all you could eat special, and I took them up on that offer. I had all kinds of fried, really tasty, not good for you food, and washed it down with a few adult beverages, and life was good. Went to bed, and then about an hour and a half after going to sleep, I woke up again with that pain that I had on Monday night, but it was at least 10 times worse. It
Oh,
literally felt like an elephant was stepping on my chest. At that point, I thought, okay, this is what you get for eating all of that food. And it's just, you're getting, acid reflux or indigestion or whatever. So got out of bed after I caught my breath, went into the bathroom, took some Tums, was able to fall asleep. So Friday morning comes. That pain that I'd been feeling every time I lifted anything with my right arm was persistent. It wasn't going away. So after working about 45 minutes, and reminder, I'm working in a medical clinic, I decided to approach one of our physicians and asked him, if he could take a look, because I explained to him what had happened that week, and he listened, and he was going, it's probably nothing, but we've got the EKG equipment here. Why don't we run a test just to make sure there's nothing going on? Because it sounds different. Something's weird. So just want to check things out. I'm like, okay. So I go back into the procedure room. So our physician is in there. One of our nurses and one of our admin slash assistants, medical assistants, were in the room. And all of a sudden, they just start laughing hysterically. And just they can't control themselves. They're laughing so hard. The reason being is because their boss is taking his clothes off at work in front of them. So they're making all kinds of sexual harassment jokes. Now, of course, this is
oh
before
my.
me. This is before Me Too and all of that. It wasn't appropriate then, certainly isn't appropriate now, but they were doing that. I'm as red as a tomato. I'm embarrassed. I'm not thinking anything else.
Oh
So after they
God.
had a couple minutes of conversations, they said, okay, well, let's go ahead and get the test going. So they hook up all the electrodes and they run the test and they look at the results and they're perplexed. They're like, this looks weird. So I thought, you know what? Let's disconnect everything and we're going to put new leads on and we're going to run the test again. So they did, and they put the little electrodes, which are basically little tape things with wires. They tape them all over your legs and your chest and arms and all that stuff. So they did it again and they placed it in different spots. And then they got the same results. So they took the results and they faxed them off to Hotel du Grace Hospital in Windsor. And Dr. Gina, who was a cardiologist there at the time, got the paperwork, and then about 10 minutes later called the clinic and said, tell Michael to get his butt in the hospital right now, and he can't drive. I had a pretty significant heart attack that Thursday night.
Oh,
I had 2 blockages in my left anterior descending artery, which is known as the widowmaker, because if people have heart attacks with blockages in that artery, they tend to die. Statistically speaking, most people do. I didn't, thankfully. But that set off what I call my year of worst case scenarios. So 17 weeks after that, I was let go from that job because they wanted to go in a different direction. Mind you, this is 2009. Remember the Great Recession? Okay.
mm-hmm.
I'm in Windsor, across the border from Detroit, Michigan, where GM, Ford, and Chrysler were drowning. And GM and Chrysler had filed bankruptcy and got government assistance to stay afloat. Ford wasn't doing much better, but they were able to navigate without getting a lot of government assistance. So needless to say, there wasn't a lot of jobs around, and anybody that did have jobs certainly weren't going to be leaving them. So it took me several months to find a new job. Ended up relocating to Toronto where I could find some work. And about 2 weeks into my new job, and this was in April of 2010, I get a phone call from my oldest daughter, today is her birthday. Happy birthday, Sarah.
Aw, happy
So
birthday.
yeah, there you go. But she was little at the time, and she called me at work and crying. I couldn't understand a thing she was saying. And then finally I was able to get from her that the bank had come and repossessed our family vehicle. Because when you're on unemployment, and anybody that has ever been through that, they know the income is less. So you're getting less money coming in. Obviously, I wasn't working because I was recovering from my cardiac event. And I was also taking heart medication that was $1,000 a month because I had no drug coverage. So food and drugs, not the fun ones, but the ones to keep your heart alive,
Yep.
were quite frankly, what we could afford. And we'd worked with all of our creditors, and they'd give us a pretty extensive grace period, and I'm thankful for that. But unfortunately, that grace period ran out, and the bank exercised their right to take back the car. So fast forward to May of 2010, so almost a year after my cardiac event. We find a place to move the family up in Toronto. I was commuting back and forth, and we got everything unpacked from the movers, and we realized that we left our bunk bed ladder for our daughter's bed back in the old house. I was going back there the next week to visit with family and friends and all of that. And I said, well, I'll just swing by the house, grab that and anything else we left behind, because we were going to be listing it with the realtor that following week. It was ready to, put back on the market. Even though the market was horrible, it's like, we got to sell it. We can't pay rent and a mortgage at the same time. That's not going to work. But they were all, obviously our mortgage payments weren't being made either because of all the things that were going on. So went down there, had the good visit with the family, and then I went by the house to grab the ladder and whatever else we left behind. Opened up the screen door in the front of the house. I saw the largest padlock I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen this padlock at Home Depot or anywhere else. And there was a small sticker on the door that said foreclosure. Now, we never got any notices from the bank saying that we were that close to that happening. I'm not sure what happened, but we didn't get the notices. And so basically over a year, I had a heart attack that should have killed me, lost my job during the Great Recession, had my car repossessed and my home foreclosed. And all of those things happened because I was burned out. My burnout created all of those scenarios. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was making mistakes at work. I was constantly in a fog. I wasn't motivated to do anything in life. I certainly wasn't eating right, wasn't sleeping well. And all of those things, all those dominoes came tumbling down. And thankfully, I survived it. But it was obviously not a fun period of time. And I see so many people that are burning out or approaching burnout are flirting with their own year of worst case scenarios. And it scares the crap out of me. So that's why I do the work that I do.
No, it was like, at what point was it when you saw that padlock with the foreclosure sticker on it? Did that hit you? Like, at what point did it click in your brain that this is what it is? Like, this is burnout? Because I think a lot of people who may not necessarily be aware of burnout tend to go down this other thought path of, why can't I catch a break? Why do all these bad things happen to me? I'm just that guy, or I'm just that person that, like, I just get shit on all the time.
Yeah. For me, it was during that 17-week recovery before I had lost my job. Was I did a lot of deep, because I had plenty of time. It wasn't working. Just deep review of what in the world happened. How did I get to this point? Why am I, having to take a nap at 2 p.m. every day when I was 40 years old at the time? 40 is a little young to have a cardiac event, but we're
That's
seeing
really young.
we're seeing a lot of people now. I know a lot of people in the healthcare industry. There's still a lot of people that are starting to have heart attacks even before 40. And that's not good, because unless you make some dramatic changes, you could have 30 or 40 years of having to take medications. Who knows if you had any, thankfully I didn't have any long lasting impact from mine, but I know some people, could have strokes or partially paralyzed or inability to work. It's not something you want to mess with. But during that time, I did a lot of reading, which was something that I had stopped doing. When I was younger, I read a lot. And then, college and university, my reading switched to, textbooks and things like that. But after getting out of college, I didn't read for pleasure. I hadn't for several years, and I loved doing it. And I just got away from it. So during that time, I rekindled my love for reading, and would read different types of leadership books and inspiration books, and comedy books, just to read and relax. And I realized that leading up to my 369 days, I'd forgot how to relax. I didn't know how to relax, and a lot of people I think are in that boat because they've been going so much. They're so driven, type A, people pleasing. They never let up off the gas. And when something happens and there's a lull, they don't know how to react. So they have to grab something quickly to fill that quote unquote void. And that's no way to live. For me, like, case in point, yesterday, I was supposed to be on 2 different shows yesterday, and both of them had to reschedule for, whatever reason. So basically that cleared out a good chunk of my day. Did I fill it with anything? No. I listened to some music. I sat out on the balcony. Like I said, the weather is beautiful now. So just relaxed, kind of eased into things. And that's an amazing way to fill time, because we automatically we look at that long to-do list that we all seem to have, and we go, oh, I can tackle this and this. You could. Should you? Or should
Not
you, if you're not,
necessarily.
if you need that time to just do it. Don't worry, that stuff's still going to be there. Don't worry about that.
Right. It's all going to be there. And I think you speak to something so important, which is something that I up until recently have truly struggled with my entire life, was this concept of like, well, when there's a gap, right? For me, like even a couple of years ago, if there was a weekend where I didn't have anything to do, I was crawling out of my skin. And like, those are just like your big red burnout flags of like, okay, I can't be still for even a hot minute. So for you to now be at this place, like, where did that transformation come? At what point did you go, okay, I am reinventing myself and now actually going to make this my career?
Yeah, for me, the reinvention started initially during that 17-week recovery period. And then, of course, after losing the job, then, my full-time job was to find a full-time job. And that took several months to do so. And that was where my focus was. And, but I had boundaries on it. It's like, okay, from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, I'm going to research and look for opportunities. On the weekends, I'm not going to look for jobs. I'm not going to do research. I'm just going to watch sports, do something with the kids, run errands, whatever the case, just live life. So I started getting in the habit of, kind of getting some time blocks around when I work. And then when I finally found the new role, which ironically was in healthcare again, my parents wanted to have me committed. They said, "Are you kidding me? You're going back into the field that nearly killed you? Are you that stupid?"
Right. Do you have
I'm
a
like,
death wish?
I say, there's quicker ways to do this. Not that we want you to, but and please don't, people. But they were quite besides themselves. And I said to them, look, I've done a lot of work on me over these last several months. I want to give this another shot, and I want to approach it differently, completely different than what I did before. And I did. And, I stayed in healthcare, for another, I'll do the math here, that would have been almost 8 years. But during that time, for the 3, for, I guess, from 2010 to I'd say 14, was just, working on myself and working, and I was getting really successful in doing things in the healthcare space. I was on boards of directors and all this kind of stuff. So going back to that people pleasing thing and giving back and all of that. And then I realized in January of 2015, I was like, whoa, my calendar. I don't like what this looks, because I started color coding my calendar. In meetings, I always use the color red, which I think a lot of people see red when they have to have a lot of meetings. but I use that one for,
Yep.
not good meetings, just a work meetings,
Right.
things like that. So, I look at my calendar and I just start, digital calendar, of course, and, skimming back and forth. And I'm like, I'm seeing a lot of red. I said, that's not good. So I looked at it and I started counting the number of meetings that I was going to have in the first part of 2015. And in January, I had 57 different meetings.
Oh,
And I said, okay, let's not do this again. So
yeah.
I immediately resigned from 2 boards of directors and withdrew from a handful of committees at work. I said, no, switched the team meetings from monthly to quarterly. And by March, it was like I had 6 meetings. So I went from 57 to 6 and was like, okay, why did I do that? And then, I had to revisit. And I'm like, all right. And then I started talking with my colleagues and noticing, wait a minute, there's a lot of people that are flirting with burnout in this sector. And this was healthcare. So I started, talking with them about it, not really sharing what happened to me, but knowing what I had known and the studies that I'd done. And like, well, I'm just going to work through it, which is the common answer. A lot of people think on how they beat burnout is I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to work through it.
Right. Or it's like, I'll wait until the summertime. And then once the summer comes, then I'll be able to take a break. Or it's like, once I just like get through this real big project that I have going on at work, like then everything will be fine.
Right. Well, it isn't. And, because we've seen studies. I know the Hartford just did a study that indicated that, that 61% of people working are identifying as burning out. Deloitte did one as well that said that 77% of the people they surveyed have been burned out in their current job. Like 7, almost 8 out of 10 people. We've got a huge, huge challenge with this. So for me, when I started seeing this and everybody was saying, well, I'm going to work through it, I'm like, that's not going to work. So I just started to start doing a little bit more research on burnout, a little bit deeper dive. And even back then, 6 years ago, there was some conversations happening, but not as much as what we're seeing today. But there was still a lot of material and a lot of research and, the stuff that, the Maslach stuff out in California and Dr. Freudenberger, who wrote a book that was published in 1980 called Burnout. 1980. Okay.
1980?
Yeah, 1980. The phrase burnout, he was the one, German guy, died about 20 years ago, I guess. But, he first coined the phrase burnout in the public forum in 1973. So this is not new, but it's getting worse because what's happened is, and I'll use this example, my iBinky, that's the nickname my brother gave me, my iPhone, because if I don't have it, I'm like a little kid without their pacifier or their binky, not happy. So he's like, can you put down your iBinky for a minute? And, so based on the number of hours I spend at it, the answer is not likely, but these devices, the smartphones, the laptops, they're great devices because they allow us to work anywhere at any time. But the disadvantage is we can work anywhere at any time.
Yep.
And we're horrible of establishing boundaries around when we work and when we don't. It's so easy. I mean, for many of us, our laptop's probably just sitting open all the time at a table somewhere. Or if we got a computer, we just go done. Or the phone is literally, 2 seconds, unlock, go to it. Answer that text message or answer the WhatsApp message or the email or the Slack message or all the notifications we get on a daily basis from these things. We don't shut down. And I think back to my dad. He used to work years ago at General Motors. And he worked on the assembly line for the most part, but towards the tail end of his career, he worked in the engine assembly plant and he drove a forklift. So he would deliver engine blocks to the assembly line so they could put engines in the cars and continue building them. I never remember seeing a forklift come home. He never brought it home. Now, I'm sure the emotions and stress of working in the auto industry, which is up and down, he did bring that home, but he never worked on anything at home. Well, for the majority of us, we can work at home, on the beach, on our vacation, all these other places. You see these images on Instagram. Oh, look at my office today. And it's like, you see this, ocean and or mountains and things like that. And yeah, it's cool that you can work in a beautiful setting. I get it. But are you taking time to actually experience that beautiful setting, or are you just plugging away? If you're not enjoying that time, I'm going to save you several $1,000s right now. Don't go on that trip. Have your background image on your computer, those mountains, and just work in your desk, because it's basically what you're doing.
Right. And save your money for all the health bills that are going to come when you eventually suffer whatever illness befalls you, because you're not truly taking the time to unplug, relax, unwind.
It's critical. And I mentioned sleep a little while ago, and lack of sleep impacts your cognitive ability, your awareness, how you digest your foods, pattern recognition, problem solving skill. But the thing of it is, when we don't get good sleep, the lack of clarity, the fogginess, all that, what happens is then you start making mistakes at work, or you have to work harder and longer on things because you're not able to flow through things. So if you get a bad night's sleep, we've all had that. We know how we feel the next day. If that's consistent over a period of time, then that's when you start having all types of mental and physical ailments and issues. And you can end up with clogged arteries or a stroke or hypertension or chronic diseases, you name it. Over 24 of the chronic diseases that we identify as chronic diseases have stress as one of the contributors.
1,000%. Even I would dare say a lot of autoimmune diseases as well. Not all, but a lot of them are related to chronic stress.
Yeah, because your body and your brain's going, I've got this stress. This is a toxin to ourselves. I need to send the energy to go fix that. So it's using energy that could be used to help, prevent all kinds of different things. I don't know, like maybe like COVID, for example. People that are stressed out, I haven't seen anything on this, but I'm certain that your stress is going to lower your immunity to be able to fight off things. That's why when you see people stressed, they get coughs and colds and whatnot. Well, you don't want to be flirting with COVID either. So again, that's so important for you to get good night's sleep and do the necessary things to keep your stress minimum. Because if you don't have prolonged stress, you won't burn out. Burnout needs the stress. If you don't have the prolonged stress, you won't burn out.
Exactly. And, I know when we first connected, you talked a little bit about like the work from home burnout because of COVID. And I think it's interesting because I see in my practice and in the people in my life, the people who are truly thriving from working from home, like my husband, he's genuinely thriving, have incredible boundaries with themselves. Where like he opens up that laptop at 7 a.m. and at 3 p.m. it is shut, his phone is gone, and we don't even talk about work. But for the most part, like you said, a lot of us don't have great boundaries with ourselves, which I think is probably why the work from home is really, really causing major burnout in folks.
It is. I mean, and also I have to do everything. Well, spoiler alert, you're not going to be able to.
Ever.
So many people became full-time school teachers during this pandemic as well. So, and we know the school time tends to coincide with when many of us work. Well, you're trying to do two things that are completely different at the same time. It's not going to work. So that's why you see a lot of parents getting up earlier and they're doing a little bit of work, and then they're helping their kids with school and making sure they're on the computer doing the schoolwork and not on their PlayStation 5. And then after dinner, they're working again. So these long days, are not sustainable. And the healthy organizations have recognized this and said, okay, we need to focus on what we really need to do right now for our customers and do that. And the other stuff, we'll get to it if it needs to get to. But unfortunately, there's a lot of organizations that had micromanaging managers that were micromanaging before that have completely lost it because they can't physically see you. And they're like, I don't know how to manage people if I don't know how to see them. So that's why you hear all those horror stories of you need to stay connected on the Zoom call all day with your camera on. I'm like, am I like 6? Is this
Right.
like, and like, and I approach these managers and I'll ask them, why do you do that? Well, I don't trust them to do their job. Okay, wait a minute. You don't trust your employees? No. Then fire them right now. Go. I can't do that. Right. Why? Well, I need them. But you don't trust them? No. Then why did you hire them? It's the managers lack confidence, training. Maybe sometimes there's a personality issue, but for the most part, it's confidence, a lack of training, and how to manage, because no one gets the proper training on that, or leaders for that matter.
Yeah. And I think it also can be burnout on the manager's end, right? When you get to the point, and they even say this in the therapy world, like when you get to the point where you feel like you can't trust other people and you have to micromanage folks, whether it's your clients, whether it's your employees, whatever it is, like you need to check yourself. That's a sign right there. We need to step back.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a thing of, I implore people, and I had great bosses, earlier in my career and, throughout, where I engaged with them, and the great ones gave me all the information that I needed. I had all the tools that I needed to do to be successful in the work that I was doing, clear instructions on when I needed to do it and when it was due. Then they got out of the way. They let me do my job.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And I remember first day I worked for a company, Rick, one of my bosses back 2 decades ago. Yikes. Time flies. But it was 3:30. I remember vividly. I'm sitting in my cubicle. He comes up, it's my first day. We already chatted earlier in the day and all that stuff. We had lunch and whatnot. And he said, okay, just some ground rules. I'm like, oh, here it comes. And he looks at me, he says, I don't care when you get here. I don't care when you leave. As long as you get your job done, we're good. You okay with that? I'm like, yep, I am.
Beautiful.
And worked for him for 3 years. And it was, that was during the .com era too, when everybody was switching jobs every 2 months because the recruiters were like saying, I know I just placed you for this job and paying this. Well, we can give you an extra $25,000 if you go over here. Okay, let me grab my my knickknacks. Okay, let's go, because it was just a zoo back then. But you had to take advantage of it. But I didn't when I was there, because I'm like, no, this is good. This is a good place for me.
Sometimes that's priceless. Having a good boss, sometimes you can't put a dollar sign on that.
Nope, it is priceless. And it makes you feel like you're being listened to, you're being supported, you get to work in your sweet spot, the things that motivate you and all that. When you do that, work flies by, and it doesn't stress you out. Even though you may have busier periods, you may have some big workloads. You come home and you're like, okay, yeah, that was a long day. It was tiring, but you don't feel completely wiped out because, well, you enjoy what you do. And I think that's a big thing for everybody to look at as well, is, rekindle what you enjoy doing. And sometimes, with people that are burned out, they don't know what they like. They don't know what brings them joy. Like, how do you not know? It's like, well, you got to ask yourself. And I know why they don't know, because they're completely fatigued and wiped out. So,
and put everybody else before themselves.
Yes. Yeah. That's self-care is not selfish, although it is, but it's a good selfish. It's
a
good thing. You got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself first, because in that way, when you do choose to give to people, they're getting a much better version of you than they would before.
So much better. So much better. Absolutely. It gives you better connections with everybody, at work and personal.
Absolutely.
So you have now made, this is your entire career is burnout prevention and intervention. And you have your own podcast, right?
Yes. The Breakfast Leadership Show. Yep.
Breakfast Leadership Show. You are a speaker. So you I assume you speak basically all over the world.
Yep. Last year, lots of virtual events because of the pandemic, but I, spoke at over 30 different conferences last year across the globe. Every industry, you name it, I've spoken with them because burnout doesn't care what industry you're in. You would think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, healthcare, education, legal, yeah, it's like those are all there, but admins and single parent groups and engineers and automotive, you name it. I spoke at their events, and my original career was public accounting. So I was an auditor and I did audits for all types of different businesses. So I'm familiar with most sectors, so I can tailor my talk. And when I go in and work with organizations, I know some of the struggles that they face because I used to, be in those industries in an auditing capacity. So I needed to know what those businesses did and how they did it. So
Right.
that decades ago career, comes back and says, "Hi, remember me?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to grab the good parts of that, not the long tax season hours. I don't need that again." Yeah. So
Right. I'm going to leave that.
exactly.
And then you have two books that are out?
Yeah, I've got a couple books related to burnout. The first one that I released 4 years ago, 369 Days, How to Survive a Year of Worst Case Scenarios, chronicles what I talked about earlier about that year of loss and some of the lessons learned from that. And then my new book, Burnout Proof, covers what burnout is in greater detail. What are some of the signs? What are some things you can do right away to stop burnout? Because people think burnout is this treadmill that you can't get off of. And you can. You make some simple adjustments, and most people, and I will say this, most people don't need to reinvent their life if they're burned out. In my situation, I did because of all kinds of other factors and the way that I was living my life. I did have to reinvent myself, but most people that I've encountered don't. They just need to make some adjustments here and there. The deeper work, and you know this in the work that you do, is figuring out why you burned out in the first place, because that's
Yeah.
important. You don't
Yes.
want to, because otherwise I've been burned out 2 or 3 times. Well, I was burned out once and it nearly killed me. So I'm not going there again. I don't want to go to
Right.
that
You
trip.
literally don't have the time to be able to do this again and again and again because it
No,
only takes one time that it could end your life.
exactly. And when you're laying on a procedure bed in the hospital and Dr. Morrissey meets you and says, "Hello," and hi, and he looks at you and he says, looks at your chart and he goes, "You don't know how lucky you are to be alive right now." And I looked at him and I was in a pretty good spirits at that particular point. And I said, "So you skipped the bedside manner course, did you?" And he laughed and we all laughed and we thought it was funny. But, it's like, I said, I know what you're getting. It's like, I get it. I'm really lucky to be here. Okay, good. What do you need to do? So we're putting 2 stents in. Got it. And he did. And nice little quick procedure, thankfully, but needless to say, it was a very, very important lesson for me to learn. And I don't want anybody to go through that. No one should be laying on a hospital bed, to have, heart surgery basically when you're that young, because it's not good. You shouldn't do that. So you need to make those adjustments and figure out why you get yourself into the situations you do.
Exactly.
Once you do that, then you can make the adjustments on that aspect of it, and then your life will be so much better for you.
Yep, absolutely. I do agree that there's definitely an element of deeper work that I think people need to do where it's like, how did I get to this spot in the first place?
Exactly.
And both of your books, are they sold on Amazon?
Amazon, you can order them on Barnes and Noble as well. If you don't like Amazon, then yeah, you can get them through Barnes and Noble as well. Or
Cool.
if you're in Canada, you can get them through Indigo or Chapters. I know there's a few other places that sell it too, but those are the ones that people tend to flock to.
Perfect. Okay. And then I have the links to everybody for the listeners out there because I know this is something that the listeners will really take to. I think burnout is something that a lot of trauma survivors suffer from because we tend to be chronic people pleasers. And it's something that I find myself talking about time and time again in my practice, something I've struggled with personally. So I am so thankful that you were able to come on and share your story and hopefully, just continue to save lives because it really is what you're doing, trying to save people from what you had to go through. Because not everybody, we don't have to have a life-threatening situation in order to check our burnout. We're trying to get people before it gets to that spot.
Yes, I agree. Prevention is so much better than recovery.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So thank you so much for coming on today. It was truly a pleasure.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everyone. For more information, please head over to lightaftertrauma.com, or you can also follow us on social media. On Instagram, we are at lightaftertrauma, and on Twitter, it is at lightafterpod. Lastly, please head over to patreon.com/lightaftertrauma to support our show. We are asking for $5 a month, which is the equivalent to a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So please head on over again. That's patreon.com/lightaftertrauma. Thank you, and we appreciate your support.